On the 21st of June 1990, Paul Stryker and his wife Karen Stryker set out on a hike along a scenic trail in the Grand Canyon National Park. It was a hike which would end in tragedy. Even before setting foot on the trail, the Strykers had made a fatal mistake, one that dozens, if not hundreds of people make when hiking the canyon each and every year. National parks in America are protected areas of wilderness, selected for their unique ecosystems, their natural beauty, or for their recreational potential. National parks balance preservation with access to nature. They remain in a minimally managed, wilderness-like state, but also have some infrastructure to enable visitors to experience them safely. Things like viewpoints, roads, campsites, and walking trails. The Grand Canyon National Park is among the most popular in the country. It is indeed considered to be one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. The park covers a huge area of the Colorado River, and is characterized by massive rocky canyons and gorges, the sheer size and beauty of which attract visitors from all over the world. These visitors can appreciate the canyon from a multitude of scenic viewpoints along its north and south rim. This is perhaps the safest and most accessible way to experience the canyon, although between 1 and 4 people each year do still fall from viewing points into the canyon itself. Visitors who wish to get a closer look can hike down into the canyon along many unique and rugged trails. Some hikers go only a short distance to a campground or viewpoint, while others travel all the way to the Colorado River and back, or from one side of the canyon to the other. Though many people complete hikes in the canyon safely each year, any trip into the canyon requires preparation. Though a national park, the canyon is still a wild and relatively untamed place. Walkers who enter the canyon must be aware of steep, unprotected drops, as well as a range of environmental hazards such as rockfalls, flash floods, and storms. Over and above all of these dangers, however, is the danger of heat and exhaustion. Temperatures in the canyon can reach as high as 49 degrees Celsius, or 120 degrees Fahrenheit, in the summer. Generally speaking, the temperature climbs higher the lower you travel into the canyon, and can also vary rapidly. Blisteringly hot days can be followed by freezing cold nights. Added to this is the fact that hiking in the canyon is an extremely strenuous activity. Walkers must carry large quantities of water, eat and drink regularly, be constantly wary of heat stroke, and pace themselves to ensure that they don't become exhausted in the heat. Signs at the start of many trails warn hikers of the dangers of hiking in the canyon. 26-year-old Paul Stryker and his wife, 26-year-old Karen Stryker, were experienced hikers. Paul had been a member of the Boy Scouts when younger, and both of them had undertaken extensive hikes in the Rocky Mountains before. They were excited to tackle the Grand Canyon, and had chosen what they believed to be a manageable route, a 29-kilometer or 18-mile hike from Grandview to the South Kaibab Trail, which they would then follow down to the Colorado River. The trip would take 2 days, and they had brought 3 liters, about 2/3 of a gallon, of water each for that time. The first day of their hike went relatively well. The pair made their way to Grapevine Creek, each consuming about half of their water as they did so. At the creek, they had the opportunity to refill their water bottles, but hesitated to do so. The creek was mostly dry, and the few little pools of water which remained were visibly full of animal life. After seeing tadpoles swimming in the water, the pair worried that drinking it might make them ill, and went on without refilling their water bottles. The next day, however, it became apparent that they had made a miscalculation. The hike was significantly longer than they had estimated when planning out their trip on a map. It was 42 kilometers, or 26 miles, rather than the 29 kilometers, or 18 miles they had anticipated. It was also incredibly hot, with temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius, or 104 Fahrenheit, even in the very limited shade. As their water supplies diminished, both began to limit their consumption of water, but didn't stop walking. They hoped to reach a campground or ranger station where they could refill their supplies sooner rather than later. Within hours, they began to struggle. Paul had been encouraging his wife to drink the majority of their water supply, leaving little for himself. His appetite disappeared and he was having trouble concentrating. Both of them were already suffering from severe dehydration, one effect of which was to reduce their ability to think clearly and make logical decisions. With no sign that the heat would diminish, and with only one bottle of water left between them, the pair became desperate. They were sure that the river was close, but the trail they were on was constantly weaving back and forth through the terrain. To get to the river as soon as possible, they left the trail and started making their way cross-country towards the Colorado River. Once they were off the trail, they found the terrain to be perilously steep and uneven. Picking their way downhill was far more strenuous than walking on the relatively flat trail. Soon, this extra expenditure of energy began to take its toll. By 2:30 p.m. on the 22nd of June, they were out of water. Increasingly aware of the danger of their situation, the pair began to shout for help in the hopes that someone might hear them. They also used a small mirror to try and signal to passing aircraft. Neither effort was successful. Paul's condition was worsening especially rapidly. He was exhausted, unable to concentrate, and struggling to maintain his balance. He tripped and fell several times on the uneven terrain, until finally he realized he could not go on. In his state of advanced dehydration, he could also not head back up the way they had come. He was stuck, with no water and no help on the way, hours away from civilization, off the trail, and unable to move, in blazing hot temperatures that would not relent for hours. Paul told Karen to go on without him, but Karen initially refused. She stayed with Paul in the glaring heat of the sun as he became disorientated, then delirious. Finally, he became non-responsive and passed away. Karen stayed with her husband for some time after his death, before finally reasoning that there was nothing more she could do. She left Paul and continued hiking cross-country towards the river, until the terrain became too perilous for her to continue. She lay down and slept where she was, exhausted, until the early hours of the next morning. Before the sun had fully risen on the 23rd, Karen set off once more. She took with her a single empty water bottle and, this time, instead of heading down into the canyon as she had been doing, she turned back and hiked upwards, aiming to rejoin the trail. She eventually did so, and continued along the route they had originally planned. She crossed the Colorado River, and at 5:30 a.m., desperately exhausted, dehydrated, and grief-stricken, she arrived at a ranger station on the other side of the canyon. With medical assistance, Karen was able to make a full recovery. Paul's body was retrieved, and he was laid to rest. Though both experienced hikers, the pair had not taken on the Grand Canyon before, nor had they ever hiked in desert conditions. As such, they had made several errors of judgment. The amount of water they carried might have been sufficient for maintaining hydration for an average person on an average day, but was entirely inadequate for the conditions they would encounter, and the level of exertion involved in the hike. To complete the hike safely in the June heat, it would have been safer to carry around 9 litres, or just under 2.5 gallons, of water each. Deciding not to refill their water because of the presence of tadpoles in the creek had also worsened their situation, and leaving the trail had been a critical error. By doing so, they ensured that they would not run into any other hikers who might be able to help them. The terrain off the trail was also significantly rougher and steeper, meaning that both of them expended way more energy than they would if hiking on the trail. And all this only for their shortcut to ultimately become unpassable. The mistakes the Strykers made were mistakes that many hikers in the Grand Canyon make each year. The vast majority are able to weather the consequences of their mistakes, returning to the trailheads sunburned and dehydrated, uncomfortable, but alive. In the case of the Strykers, though, their underestimation of the Grand Canyon was ultimately a fatal one.